Good morning to everyone, and maybe good afternoon for some participants. And dear participants, dear panelists, this is one of the seminars of the series of seminars that WTO Accessions Division is organizing on accessions, and it is devoted to the Eurasian region. So now we have 66 participants in our room. And let me first introduce myself. My name is Zharkin Kakimzhanova, and I used to work in the permanent mission of Kazakhstan in Geneva for 10 years, and I was dealing with the WTO accession of my country. And now let me introduce our distinguished panelists. Mr. Badriddin Abidov, very welcome to this webinar. Mr. Abidov is a Deputy Minister of Investments and Foreign Trade of Uzbekistan, and he is also a Chief Negotiator for WTO Accession of Uzbekistan. Mr. Vepa Hajiyev, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkmenistan. Mr. Hajiyev is also the Chairman of the Government Commission that was set up to examine the issues related to the accession of Turkmenistan to the WTO. Mr. Hajiyev, welcome to the webinar. Ms. Ekaterina Mayorova, Director of the Department for Trade Negotiations at the Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation. Previously, Ekaterina was a Chief Negotiator of the Russian Federation for Services during the WTO accession process. Welcome to the webinar, Ekaterina. And Mr. Aziz Ibrohim, he is the head of the WTO Affairs Department at the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade of Tajikistan. Mr. Ibrohim, welcome. So at the outset, I would like to thank the speakers for being with us today. Let me also thank our participants for joining this webinar and showing their interest in the Eurasian region. I see that, as I said, we have already 68 participants in the beginning of the seminar. I hope there will be more joining in the course. So the WTO Accession Division is holding the series of webinars during these weeks, and this is the first one, which is devoted to the region of Eurasia. So as you know, there are multi-dimensional and often conflicting definitions of Eurasia based on geographical, historical, geopolitical, and integrational perspectives. Geographically speaking, Eurasia is a massive supercontinent of Europe and Asia. In geopolitical terms, academics tend to view former Soviet republics as Eurasian countries. Lastly, there is a concept of Eurasian Union as a new integration project emerged in the late 20th century, following President Nazarbayev's call for trade and economic integration among the former Soviet countries. Today, this concept has evolved to a customs union and a single market of Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz Republic, and the Russian Federation, which you know as the Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU. We are also aware that different international organizations use different approaches to defining Eurasia, mostly based on the nature and the scope of their activities. The history of Eurasian WTO accession dates back to 1986, when the Working Party on the Accession of Bulgaria to the GATT was established in 1986. Bulgaria later became the first Eurasian country that joined the WTO in 1996. In parallel, right after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, we witnessed an increase of applications for accession to the WTO by the former Soviet republics. Later, these republics also applied for WTO accession pursuant to Article 12 of the WTO agreement after the GATT. The main reasons behind this observer status of or accessions applications were transitioned from centrally planned economy inherited from the Soviet Union into free market economy, as well as the structural reforms associated with this transition. The accession process was used by many acceded countries as a driving force for the structural reforms. To date, we have seen the accessions of 19 Eurasian countries to the WTO, including those of Mongolia, China, and Afghanistan, from the broader Eurasia. My country, Kazakhstan, has joined the WTO in 2015. Before the Kazakhstan's accessions, we also witnessed the accessions of Tajikistan and the Russian Federation in 2013 and 2012. Today, we have Russia and Tajikistan among our panelists in this session. On average, Eurasian accessions have lasted 9 years and 4 months. The Kyrgyz Republic acceded to the WTO in a record 2 years and 8 months. Kazakhstan's accession has been the longest so far. It took almost 90 years, or almost 20 years, 19 years and 9 months. So currently we have several countries from the region who are in the process of joining the WTO, including Azerbaijan, Belarus, Uzbekistan, and some others. And recently, lastly, the Turkmenistan sent a request for observer status at the WTO General Council, and it happened last month. And this application will be considered by WTO members. The Eurasian region plays an important role in the global economy and the multilateral trading system. In fact, Kazakhstan, as one of the most recently acceded WTO members, initially was due to host the WTO's 12th Ministerial Conference, MC12, earlier this month. This would have been the first WTO Ministerial Conference in Central Asia. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, the MC12 has now been postponed to a later stage. So with this short introduction, I suggest that we hear from our distinguished panelists. So since we have the time of our webinar is rather limited, I would like to ask our speakers to limit their speeches to 8-10 minutes, please. And also I would like to make the small announcement to the participants. So if you have questions, please send them via the Q&A mark in the center down of the screen. You can send your questions in writing, and we will have time at the end of the session when our panelists will be able to reply to your questions. And please indicate to whom you address your question. So first, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Abidov, the Chief Negotiator for WTO Accession of Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan's accession process has started in 1994. It was 25 years ago. The last meeting, the third meeting of the Working Party took place in 2005. And today, after 15 years of pause, we see that Uzbekistan is fully back to the accession process and fully prepared and committed and re-energized. In fact, we know that next week, on Tuesday, the fourth Working Party meeting of Uzbekistan is taking place. So let us now hear from the Chief Negotiator, Mr. Abidov. And I would like also to say that Mr. Abidov has informed us that he will have to leave the webinar a bit earlier. So if you have questions, please address them. You can write them now during the speech, and we will give the floor for replies to the questions to Mr. Abidov right after his speech. So, Mr. Abidov, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Zharkin. Good morning, dear participants of the session. It gives me a great pleasure to participate at this webinar on WTO accessions and speak among panelists of the session, which is dedicated to accession issues in the Eurasian region. Taking this opportunity, I would like to thank the WTO Secretariat for organizing this webinar and inviting me to speak. As was rightly indicated by the moderator, the Eurasia is a key region for the WTO. Historically, trade has played a critical role in shaping Eurasia by connecting various political, economic, and social forces of people and communities, such as those located along the Silk Road. In modern times, trade has once again served as a catalyst for promoting dialogue and unlocking the economic potential of the newly independent states, which emerged following the redrawing of the Eurasian map in early 90s. At the time of establishment of WTO in 1995, Eurasia was underrepresented in the organization. During the last 25 years, 36 new members acceded to WTO, including 16 from Eurasia. Moreover, today, out of 23 countries in accession process, 6 of them from this region. Thus, WTO has expanded to 164 members, and reach of its rules and disciplines has been extended to over 98% of global trade. With several large economies actively pursuing WTO membership, Eurasia continues to be a source of strength and dynamism for the rules-based multilateral trading system. Dear participants, a statement of Uzbekistan, as Zharkin mentioned, on its intention to join WTO was submitted in December 1994. And in the same year, the General Council of WTO established Working Party on our accession. Today, Working Party now consists of 39 countries, representing major trading partners of Uzbekistan. During 2002 and 2005, 3 rounds of meetings of the Working Party were conducted, with multilateral and bilateral meetings held in Geneva. After 2007, the accession process was temporarily suspended, and at the end of 2017, at the initiative of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, His Excellency Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev, this process was reactivated. In particular, in accordance with the priority directions of the development strategy of the Republic of Uzbekistan for 2017 to 2021, the country is undergoing radical reforms in all spheres of economy, including liberalization of the foreign trade regime, currency regulation, customs and tax laws, which creates the most favorable conditions for enhancing the WTO accession process. Along with this, the address of the President of Uzbekistan to our parliament on 24 January this year highlighted the importance of cooperation with WTO and holding the 4th meeting of the Working Party on accession of our country. In this regard, currently we are carrying out comprehensive reforms aimed at ensuring the achievement of acceptable conditions for the accession of Uzbekistan, including bringing the national legislation in line with the norms and principles of the WTO. At the same time, the elaboration of well thought out and carefully verified accession strategy is of particular importance for us. The main idea is that adopted conditions of accession should neutralize the negative impact on national producers and sensitive sectors, having a positive impact on the development of the economy through increased competition, improved product quality, implementation of international standards, expanding export potential through access of new markets, and strengthening investment cooperation. In particular, in order to resume the meeting of the Working Party after 15 years of dormancy, we have submitted to WTO Secretariat more than 20 documents elaborating foreign trade regime of Uzbekistan, which include an updated and revised memorandum on the foreign trade regime, 10 annexes to MFTR, including economic statistics, a list of legislative acts on import licensing procedure, information on the customs valuation system, on technical barriers to trade, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and the list of bilateral agreements in foreign trade. Moreover, we submitted checklist of illustrative issues on the WTO agreement on TBT, checklist on SPS, information on the TRIPS, a questionnaire on import licensing procedures, revised offers on goods and specific commitments in services, and as well as replies to more than 300 questions of member states. And of course, legislative action plan to harmonize national legislation in accordance with WTO agreements and other documents were also submitted. Internally, we have also made a major transformations as part of accession process. Interagency commission was created, which is headed by the Deputy Prime Minister of Uzbekistan, Minister of Investments and Foreign Trade, Mr. Sardar Murzakov, and also negotiation group headed by me, as well as 9 working groups in specific areas like goods, services, technical barriers, SVS, agriculture, intellectual property, customs issues, trade facilitation, and other issues were established. The fourth meeting of the working party is scheduled for 7 of July next week, as Zharkin mentioned. The event will be organized on the WTO Secretariat Diversify platform in a hybrid format, where delegations from diplomatic missions in Geneva will be physically present in the conference room, as well as experts from capitals, including the Uzbekistan delegation, will be participating via video conference. Moreover, we are ready to hold bilateral meetings with WTO members on goods and services. Now we are elaborating the specific schedule of these negotiations to hold after the working party meeting. We hope that this working party meeting will be successful in order to advance in the accession process of Uzbekistan. And I would like to thank you once again for this webinar, and I'm ready to take up any questions if there is any. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Badriddin, for this very informative statement about the state of play in your preparations to the accession negotiations and about the reforms which are going on in your country. So, first of all, of course, we would like to wish you a very successful meeting next week, and in general, to have a lot of energy and patience in the beginning of this way to the WTO. So it will take a lot of efforts from the negotiating team, and especially from the chief negotiator. So I see that we have some questions from the audience. So if I may, I would like to give this question to you, Badriddin. So Igor Pilipenko is asking, does your country plan to join the Advisory Center on the WTO law, ACWL? What are the drawbacks and alternatives? Do you have any plans to join this Advisory Center? I'm sure you know about this center, which is based in Geneva, and which gives a lot of technical assistance to the developing countries and to the acceding countries as well.
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, in fact, as an acceding country, and after 15 years of dormancy, when the last working party meeting was held in 2005, now we have a very new team and negotiators on many aspects of the accession, and we also need capacity building and also training of our negotiators and experts. Now we are cooperating with many other donor countries and international organizations, including World Bank, UNDP, and also donor countries are assisting us in formulation of our documents and preparing the documents, and also the training of experts, national experts and negotiators throughout this accession process. Of course, I know about the existence of the Advisory Center, and our permanent mission is now working with this center to find out the possible areas of cooperation in terms of the support of the accession process of Uzbekistan. And we'll do necessary work with this center in due course. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Abidov. So I would like also ask you a question about the business community in Uzbekistan. So we know all who follows development in Eurasian region and recent developments in Uzbekistan. We all know about the comprehensive and intensive reforms which are now implemented by the government of Uzbekistan under the leadership of your President Mirziyoyev. So I would like to ask you now, when you are going to intensify your WTO accession negotiations, what is the mood in the business community? Are they aware of the WTO accession process? Do you have any activities to raise the awareness in the business community and to prepare them for this process, or do you involve them in the preparations to your negotiations in the WTO?
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, indeed, it's very important in the process of accession to provide the whole information about the process of accession, and also of course the business community in Uzbekistan, which is now very vibrant in the current very wide-scale reforms in the economy of Uzbekistan. They're very interested in the accession process, and of course they have many issues which are, are very pertinent to the activities, and they're also very interested in knowing what is the accession process and what is the negotiation status. And of course we have established good system of information network through our website, and also the different kind of platforms to have the information sharing with all the business community. And also we are working with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Uzbekistan, which is very active in bringing together all the business community to provide information about the accession process to WTO, and overall the trade cooperation of Uzbekistan with other international partners. And of course, we have also a very good platform of communication with the not only with business community but also with the parliament, and we have established the mechanism of providing the information, and also the seminars, and also the roundtable meetings and discussions with the parliament representatives. So to reply to a question, yes, business community is very interested in knowing what's going on with the accession process, and we have very active contact with the business community to provide information about the accession process of Uzbekistan.
Thank you, Badriddin. So again, best of luck to you and to your colleagues and to your negotiating team with your working party next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good luck to the webinar. And thank you.
Thank you. Now I would like to invite the Turkmen delegation. So we expected Mr. Hajiyev, Deputy Minister, to participate, but due to some prior commitments, he had to leave. But we have now his colleague who will make a statement. And please, I give the floor to you, please. You have the floor. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Kakimzhanova. I'm Deputy Foreign Minister Hajiyev, and ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome all participants of today's WTO session and express my gratitude for wonderful organization of our meeting. Dear colleagues, the process of studying of Turkmenistan's accession to the WTO started in January 2013 with creating the Special Government Commission on studying the issues of Turkmenistan's accession to WTO. Over a span of years, this Government Commission has considered in detail all aspects of interaction with the WTO, which would meet the national interest of Turkmenistan, as well as it was also studied the experience of other acceded countries. multilateral trade agreements required for the WTO membership, including the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the Agreement on Trade-related Investment Measures, the Agreement on Import Licensing Procedures, the Agreement on Safeguards, the General Agreement on Trade in Service, Agreement on Trade-related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights, Rules and Procedures on Dispute Settlement, Understanding, Trade Policy Review, and many other aspects. In order to intensify the work and to give a new impetus to work in this direction, on July 5th, 2019, the composition of the Government Commission was renewed, which brought together the representatives from key government agencies that are in a charge for the country's foreign and economic activities. The Commission, with the new members, conducted several meetings. Also, in August 11th, 2019, within the framework of the first Caspian Economic Forum, the representatives of the WTO, headed by the Director of the Department for Accession, organized the side event National Seminar on Accession to the WTO. Moreover, in order to conduct the bilateral consultations with the administration of the WTO on concrete steps of Turkmenistan's accession to the organization, the Government Commission sent the Executive Secretary of the Commission to Geneva at the WTO headquarters last year. The outcomes of the two recent meetings of the Government Commission on accession of Turkmenistan to WTO, held on April and May, the Commission came to the decision that Turkmenistan's participation in the WTO as an observer would contribute to the dynamic development of the national economy. Further, on May 15th, the presidents of Turkmenistan approved the decision of the Government Commission and signed the resolution on the accession of Turkmenistan to the WTO as an observer. According to this document, the Turkmen side has sent an application, as you said, Madam, letter to join WTO as an observer in the address to the Director General of WTO, along with the attachment overview of the economic policy and foreign trade regime of Turkmenistan. Dear colleagues, I would like to bring to your attention that the process of accession of Turkmenistan to the WTO has started with the implementation of a policy of reviewing foreign economic activity. An additional impetus towards the realization of some work in this direction was given by the program for the development of Turkmenistan's foreign economic activities for 2020-2025. The document includes a set of measures for the effective use of market mechanisms to attract foreign investments in various industries of our country, diversify export-oriented and import substituting production and countries' rapid industrialization. I would like to name three main factors on which accession to the WTO is beneficial for Turkmenistan. First, the integration and accession of Turkmenistan to international economic structures as WTO will enable our country to fully strengthen its position in foreign trade, as well as to carry out comprehensive beneficial cooperation. Secondly, Turkmenistan pays a great attention to attracting investments from abroad and developing trade relations with foreign countries. Accession to the WTO provides guarantees and transparency for investors and the country's trading partners. Thirdly, accession to the WTO will allow Turkmenistan to move forward its position on commercial issues and find the rapid solutions. Our work in the WTO will be aimed at all-round study of present trade rules, as well as we will work on development of a new principles and mechanisms that will meet modern realities and challenges. I want to note that in accordance with the procedures for accession to the WTO within the framework of hybrid and informative virtual meetings, this month the General Council of WTO will consider the application letter presented by Turkmenistan for observer status. In this connection, the Turkmen side looking forward to receive support of the WTO member countries in this matter. In conclusion, I want to thank all of you for today's meeting, and I'm looking forward to joint work and fruitful cooperation. I thank you for your attention, Madam.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Hajiyev, for a very comprehensive review of Turkmenistan's trade and economic policy ambitions and how Turkmenistan intends to use WTO accession as part of the trade and economic policy. So, of course, we hope that Turkmenistan's request for observer status will be considered positively by WTO members, which will then allow Turkmenistan to attend WTO meetings and learn more about the organization to better equip itself for eventual accession negotiations down the road. And here I would like to mention that in the request for observer status, Turkmenistan has also indicated its intention to initiate accession negotiations within a period of 5 years. So, so far we heard Uzbekistan, currently acceding government, and we heard from Turkmenistan, a potential observer government. So now we would like to turn our attention to the relatively new WTO members who also went through the accession process recently. So we would like to hear from the distinguished representatives of the Russian Federation and Tajikistan about their accession and post-accession experience. In the yesterday's afternoon session of chief negotiators on accessions, we also heard that WTO accession is just the beginning, and the real life and real work starts afterwards, after you become a member. So please share your post-accession experience. So we start with the Russian Federation. Russian Federation joined the WTO in 2012 after over 19 years of accession negotiations, and today the Russian Federation is a very active member of the WTO. So Ekaterina, if you could please tell us how it is to be the WTO member. Maybe you could also give some tips to currently acceding governments, especially those in our region, on how to best prepare themselves for post-accession and what awaits them behind the doors of the WTO. So, Ekaterina, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Zharkin, and I would like also to thank WTO Secretariat for organizing this event and to giving me possibility to share our accession experience. I would probably start with the experience of accession negotiations on the process of accession first. We formally launched the process in 1993, but the active phase started back in 2000. It started with market access negotiations on goods and services, and in parallel we had multilateral discussions on the Working Party report. And in parallel, and I think it's a common feature of all accessions, in parallel we had the most massive and large-scale regulatory reform affecting different areas of economic activity. Within the context of the accession process, we have redrafted totally our legislation in many areas like TBT, intellectual property rights, currency controls, investment regulations, competitions, and many others. So the accession process and accession negotiations was part of the domestic economic reform. And I think it would be fair to say that WTO accession was used as a tool to modernize domestic legislation and to incorporate regulatory standards adopted and used all over the world into a domestic regulatory system. The process itself significantly contributed to making our economy more competitive in the world markets, in investment climate more attractive, and business environment more predictable and transparent. Russia was not the first one in a long queue of acceding countries. I think we acceded as 28th member. We were 28th member to accede to WTO. And before us, there were a number of very big accessions, which had huge implications on our process as well. The challenges of that were quite obvious. I would say that there was a temptation for our negotiating counterparts to use other completed accessions as a benchmark, and there were, throughout the whole process, there were attempts to impose WTO plus commitments already agreed by other governments. I think that is a common trend that was later on confirmed in the context of accession of Kazakhstan. Now we can see the same trend in the current accessions as well. So those who are in the process of accession now, those who are willing to start the process, they have to be aware of that trend, and they have to be prepared. Apart, or in addition to attempts to borrow the experience of other acceding governments, there were also attempts to borrow concepts discussed in Doha development multilateral round of negotiations, which went in parallel to Russia's accession process. Tricky way, I would say it was a tricky way to move forward elements of multilateral negotiating agenda in a situation when the multilateral negotiations are in fact in deadlock. So those were two sources of our WTO plus discussions and finally commitments that we have. And I think this is perfectly relevant to those who are now negotiating their accession terms. Dealing with these WTO plus certainly raise questions in terms of uniformity of multilateral rules. But I will not make a stress here because internally, and our experience proves that internally, those commitments that at least Russia agreed to undertake played a rather positive role. And I would bring an example of domestic regulation, which is the area where Russia agreed to quite extensive commitments that have not been incorporated into the WTO rulebook yet. But this fact perfectly was perfectly in line with domestic reform going on when we've been acceding. And this reform was aimed at simplification of regulatory system, simplification of licensing system, reducing administrative barriers to economic operators. So in the very end, I would say that accepting these commitments was a good thing for Russia. Another challenge that I would like to bring your attention to is the length of the process. For us, the length was extreme. For instance, market access talks on goods and services lasted for 8 years, from 2000 to 2008. Later on, we had also multilateral discussions on the Working Party report, but market access talks themselves lasted for 8 years. So acceding government has to make sure that negotiation positions correspond to long-term development strategy for different economic sectors. In simple words, you have to protect what you really need to protect. And you can easily liberalize where there you see no threats and where you are interested in increasing imports. Obviously, the risks that potentially are linked with WTO membership among WTO accession are the risks of market access liberalization. And after the accession, once Russia became a WTO member in 2012, we had to adopt a number of measures to mitigate the risks of liberalization in different areas. There was a plan of adjustment of the Russian economy to the WTO membership. And this plan was operational for a number of years, and I think the goals of this plan were successfully reached. However, again, based on the experience of my country, I might say that those risks from liberalization and consequences from liberalization are far not the major factor affecting countries' position in the world trade and development of the national economy. There are other global factors that have much more serious impact on how we develop and how we perform on the world scene. Although different groups of interest in Russia tend to explain all economic failures by disadvantageous conditions of the WTO membership. That is also something which I would like to bring the attention of the current negotiators to, because that is something they would need to deal after ratification of the accession package and once the country becomes a WTO member. A lesson to learn from that is that public awareness and public understanding of what WTO is and what it is about is crucially important. And that is important both at the stage of accession negotiations and afterwards. We invested a lot in popularization of the WTO and in education. Mass education and education of specialists in trade policy. It turned out that negotiators themselves had to engage in this popularization and education process. And that was beneficial for them as well, because it was a possibility also to personally take a temperature of attitude of different representatives of business community and consumers and producers to the accession and to the terms of accession. It was a possibility to identify sensitivities at the stage of negotiations. And after that, this investment gave us good specialists in trade policy, both for government sector as well as for business. To conclude, I would have to say that one might be now discouraged by the crisis of the WTO we all now face. But the experience of Russia and the experience of our Eurasian Economic Union partners clearly prove that WTO can deal with very unusual and very unique situations. Solutions, for example, a solution was found to the accession of the customs union members, which passed a huge amount of authority for regulation of foreign trade to supranational level. So what I would like to stress that WTO still, notwithstanding the crisis it now faces, WTO still has a huge potential for solving different problems. So I do hope those who are now in the process of accession would manage to solve all the problems on their way and will have a success finally. And I wish them all the best and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katya. This was very informative and very useful statement, and straight from your experience as a chief negotiator on services. I would like to agree with everything what you said about starting with the experience, the practice of using the precedents in the accession negotiations, and also on all the challenges you mentioned that the acceding countries face during the accession process, and the fact that everything what is happening in the world may affect your negotiations on the WTO accessions, and as well as the work which you have to provide domestically with your domestic stakeholders, and the importance of raising awareness and popularizing the WTO. So we, Kazakhstan, I think we went through all these stages as well, and we also faced all these challenges. And I think your statements gave many important hints to the representatives of the acceding governments, definitely, and the role of the WTO in the crisis as well. And yes, WTO serve as a basis for the trade negotiations all around the world. So, and the importance of the WTO is no doubt is still there. So, and you mentioned the several areas of your accession negotiations, and you mentioned domestic regulations and some other things. I would like to ask you also about the agriculture. So I know that you have a very good results in the agricultural sector. So I know that agriculture, everyone knows that agriculture is a very sensitive area, and in the during the accession negotiations, the domestic stakeholders and parliament and everyone in the country, they pay a lot of attention to the negotiations on the commitments in the area of agriculture. So I would like to ask you to share your post-accession experience. You are already in the WTO during 8 years, and I know that you have some success stories in agriculture. Could you please share with your post-accession experience in this area? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I also registered a question in the chat tried to respond privately, so it disappeared now from the chat. So I probably, in my response, I would cover both. On agriculture, that is true. That was one of the most sensitive topics of our accession negotiations, and we continued the talks on agriculture till the very last moment. Moreover, notwithstanding the fact that we closed market access negotiations back in 2008, we had to come back to them at the stage of consolidation of our goods market access offers in order to compile and to bring together different results of negotiations on tariff quotas. So both in terms of market access and in terms of domestic support, this topic was one of the main negotiating track throughout the whole process for many years. And that was also one of the last elements of the final deal that we closed. On domestic support, well, first of all, in terms of tariffs, I think altogether, we feel quite comfortable with the results of tariff negotiations. Though after we acceded to the WTO, there were a number of well-known developments which also affected the level of and the conditions of market access to Russia. So the picture is not quite clear. You know, it had a number of different factors which we have to keep in mind. As for domestic support, that was one of the principal elements for us. We needed to have AMS, and we finally managed to negotiate AMS. At the same time, we failed to negotiate export subsidies. And that is the result to which other WTO members multilaterally came only several years after our accession in Bali. So there was an agreement to eliminate agricultural export subsidies. So as a members of the WTO, clearly we were one of the strongest supporters of the negotiations in agriculture. We continue to be one of the most consistent negotiators in multilateral discussions on agriculture, both on export subsidies as well as on domestic support, because the levels that we managed to negotiate certainly are uncomparable with the levels of our main competitors in the world market, and we see it as an unfair situation which we would like to be corrected in the context of multilateral negotiations. So that would be my response to your question, Zharkin. And I also registered a question on what other sectors were sensitive in the context of our accession negotiations. I mentioned agriculture.
Yes, please.
I would also add civil aircraft and automotive industry. In goods part, and in services, there was a financial services issue, also keeping our attention for all the years of negotiations. On goods, in both cases, if you look through our goods schedule of concessions and commitments, you will easily notice that in both of these areas, we have the highest levels of final bound rates. On top of that, during the accession negotiations, we had several programs of development of automotive industry, and some of WTO inconsistent elements were used in these programs. So in the process of accession, we had to negotiate a transition period for those. so sorry, of WTO minus on a temporary basis, which now is over. But I mean, that also took time for negotiations, and it costed something, of course, because if you get something, you have to pay. So that were the most sensitive, probably, sectors of the economy that we had to deal with.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ekaterina. I think we come back to the questions and answers at the end of the session, if you have time left. Now I would like to turn to the our speaker from Tajikistan, Mr. Aziz Ibrohim, head of the WTO Affairs Department at the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade of Tajikistan. Tajikistan joined the WTO in 2013, following 11 years and 8 months of accession negotiations. So, 7 years already that Tajikistan is a member of the WTO. Mr. Ibrohim, the floor is yours, please.
Hello, my name is Aziz Ibrohim. Good afternoon to all dear participants. Before I proceed, I want to thank you, Ms. Zharkin, for the session. Also, before with my remarks, allow me, on the behalf of the government of the Republic of Tajikistan, to kindly extend my appreciation for the organizers of today's event. So, since the independence Tajikistan has entered a new phase in its development, we all know that the achievement of development goals is primarily connected with the development rate. So, as Ms. Zharkin mentioned earlier, so on May 2001, Tajikistan submitted its application on membership to the WTO, World Trade Organization. And after 12 years of bilateral and multilateral negotiation, so we achieved, and on 2nd March 2013, Republic of Tajikistan became 159th member of the World Trade Organization, WTO. And it should be noted that that during the accession process of Tajikistan, conducted 9 working group meetings and provided answer to more than 1,300 specific questions from the WTO members. Also, during this process, more than 100 normative legal acts were either amended or replaced. With the view of strengthening foreign economic relations, simplifying trade procedures, attracting foreign investments, using the trade and economic disputes resolutions mechanisms, and protecting the country's economic interest, the Republic of Tajikistan is working with the WTO as a reliable partner. Following Tajikistan accession to the WTO, a number of commitments have been implemented, and other commitments are being implemented in line with the timeline. The program of adjustment of the economy of the Republic of Tajikistan related to the membership of the WTO was adopted by the government on the 31st October 2014. This document serves as a post-accession plan for the country, and currently almost 70% of the program has been implemented. To ensure the transparency arising from various WTO agreements, the Republic of Tajikistan has so far prepared and submitted to the WTO more than 40 notifications in various areas such as intellectual property, technical barriers to trade, import licensing, rules of origin, simplification of trade procedure, subsidy and countervailing measures, also agriculture and free trade areas and services, and etc. To get better business condition. For the domestic enterprise abroad, the Republic of Tajikistan has joined WTO Accession working parties of Uzbekistan, Iran, Azerbaijan, and Belarus. The Republic of Tajikistan is a member of Article 12 group, and its informal meetings participate in discussion in various issues such as difference between applied and bound rates of duties, support of the agricultural sector, obligation in trade in service, and others. Also, in December 2017, at the 11th WTO Ministerial Conference in Buenos Aires, Argentina, along with the other member states, Republic of Tajikistan joined the Investment Forestation Initiative for Development. The government of the Republic of Tajikistan pays special attention to the trade and economic relations with the WTO members. Since the beginning of the accession process, WTO members provide immense support to the Republic of Tajikistan in different aspects, including bilateral and multilateral negotiation. After WTO accession, the economy of Tajikistan boosted to another level by opening doors to liberalized multilateral trading system. As a result, over the last 3 years, a share of Tajikistan export to total trade increased from 20 to 26%. Trade partners from 90 to 110 countries, and exportable products diversified from 150 to about 480. In order to comply with the rules and regulations of WTO Coordination Committee on Trade Facilitation, system was established, which held 10 meetings, created 8 technical working groups, and drafted more than 20 legal documents. In addition, a roadmap of the committee was developed, which contains further actions of implementation of trade facilitation reforms. Tajikistan Trade Portal, Tajikistan was launched Trade Portal in April 2019, which is the first experience in Central Asia, and it's a platform that will guide both local and foreign enterprises on import, export, and transit procedures for the more than 1,500 products. So it made easy access to the local and foreign enterprises. The pilot phase of the single window on clearance of export and import and transit procedure was launched on 8th of November 2019. That will significantly streamline Tajikistan regional and international trade. The other thing which I want to mention that the first trade policy review of the Republic of Tajikistan was scheduled in April 2020, but unfortunately, due to COVID-19 pandemic, it was postponed for uncertain time. So currently, the offer of conducting the TPR online is being reviewed by the relevant ministers and agencies. Then, the government of Tajikistan and its international is committed to take necessary steps to boost trade and investment and expand economic partnership with the WTO members. So for conclusion, I want to say that seizing this opportunity on my own behalf and on the Minister of Economic Development and Trade of the Republic of Tajikistan, I would like to thank our distinguished guests for this participation, and also want to thank Mrs. Zharkin for organizing this session. Thank you. Thank you for your all attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrohim, for sharing with us with these very valuable insights on your post-accession experience. I think your statement very clearly shows that the country keeps very busy after the accession. So you have mentioned a number of notifications you have prepared and the legislative reforms you are carrying out. So this is, and also the implementation of the trade facilitation agreement and other endeavors by the Tajik government. So it is, of course, your note about the boosting of the economy and diversifying the products, like from 150 to 480 sounds really very, very impressive. So I think we can wish you to continue this road and to have a lot of success in your economic reforms. And now I see that there is a question from the audience, you, on especially to which is related to the diversification of the economy. So does Tajikistan have a program to diversify its economy to utilize the WTO membership efficiently? This question comes from Mr. Turakulov Palijon. Please, the floor is yours.
Sorry, Mr. Zharkin, I was reading the questions, and currently, as I mentioned earlier, that we have a program of adjustment of the economy of the Republic of Tajikistan, which we are working now according to this plan. So so it's still in progress. We're still working, and so it was adopted, as I already mentioned, it was adopted by the government on 31st September 2014. So this document serves as a post-accession plan for the country, and currently we're almost 70% of it has been implemented. So we're still working according to this accession plan.
Thank you. So
yes.
And so I don't see any more questions from the audience, and I would like to give the opportunity for our speakers to make concluding remarks to the webinar. And here I would like to ask you, maybe you could give your most important hints and tips to the acceding governments. So already, Ekaterina, you mentioned several of them. So I, as someone who also participated in the accession process, I can say that my tip would be the longer you wait, the longer you are in the accession process, the higher is the price. So it's better not to wait for too long. This is probably my message also to the Turkmen, to the representative of Turkmenistan. So now we see that Uzbekistan is has intensified its accession process. So, and I would like to say that the experience of previous accessions shows that it's better to the earlier you start your accession process, the better will be the result. So now I want to give the floor to you, Ekaterina, and afterwards to Mr. Ibrohim for the concluding remarks, please.
Well, thank you very much. I think I already gave some concluding remarks in my initial statement. I just want to echo what you've said about the pace of negotiations. I agree that timing is an important issue, and I also touch upon that in my statement. However, I would like to warn everyone, saying that you have to rush slowly, so that the fast movement towards the completion of negotiations is without prejudice to the quality of the commitments you are negotiating. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Katerina. So, Mr. Ibrohim,
So I want to support Ms. Zharkin remarks about the time that is to not take it long. So as a negotiation, if you want to conduct negotiation well, so firstly you have to think about your sensitive products which you need to protect. So also it will be an answer for the question, what's the most sensitive sectors for negotiation? So the most sensitive sectors for negotiation is the product which is most sensitive. So this will be my tip. And also I support Ms. Zharkin remarks which she mentioned earlier.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ibrohim. So with this, I would like to thank again the speakers from the WTO members countries, and to give the floor for the concluding remarks to the Turkmen delegation. So if you have something to say as a concluding remarks, so how useful was this webinar for you as a country which is now at the state of becoming the observer of the WTO? Please.
Спасибо большое, госпожа Какимзhanova. Для нас очень было полезно услышать опыт наших соседей, наших коллег.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kakimzhanova. It was very, very useful to hear the experience of our neighbors.
И мы, как новая страна, которая начала процесс, подала заявку на вступление в ВТО в качестве наблюдателя. И мы знаем, что у нас предстоит долгий путь, переговорный процесс, и мы сегодня услышали рекомендации госпожи Mayorova, поэтому мы будем степ-бай-степ идти потихоньку, постепенно к процессу вступления в эту организацию.
And as a new country that in a process of acceding to the WTO, we have heard today valuable advices that was given by the speakers. Thank you, Ms. Mayorova, for your also for sharing us the experience of your country, and we will follow them, and we will take measures.
Но мы понимаем, что в любом случае нам надо работать с этой международной организацией. И мы в конце прошлого года приняли программу развития внешнеэкономической деятельности Туркменистана на среднесрочную перспективу. И мы в этой программе, значит, включили вопрос вступления в эту организацию, Всемирную торговую организацию, и мы будем двигаться в этом направлении. И поэтому, как господин заместитель министра Vepa Hajiyev сказал, мы уже направили заявку, подали заявку на имя генерального секретаря, и мы надеемся на вашу поддержку в этом вопросе.
The last year we have adopted the program of the President Turkmenistan, a program for the development of Turkmenistan's foreign economic activities for 2025, and it is a middle-term program, and there it was listed the WTO as a we have to enhance our work in this direction, and we will do whatever possible to enhance our cooperation in this direction.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your remarks, and we wish you success, and we wish you, of course, to have the positive decision on the observership status of Turkmenistan, and hope to see you among the observers very soon. So with this, I would like to close this session on Eurasian accession to the WTO. At the moment, we have 77 participants, I know that before we had just a few minutes ago about 90 participants. So I hope that this webinar was useful, and I believe that we had a very valuable discussions. And of course, for the attendees that are interested in Eurasian region and especially in WTO accessions in this region, I believe it was a useful discussion. So once again, I want to thank all our speakers who joined us today, and we hope that we will have more events of this nature in the future, where we can learn from each other and through the exchange of experiences and views. Thank you very much to everyone. So the session is closed. Thank you.